Hi all, welcome to Property Avenue WA. I'm TV, he's Oscar D'Souza, and our whole purpose of our program is to discuss and chat about things WA when it comes to property, and it's specifically Western Australian property, although we might digress on the odd occasion and compare, for example, and some of those things are what we're talking about tonight. We really encourage you to send us through your questions or let us know that you are about, and we're not really concerned how silly some of those questions may be, but if you've got something that you really want to know, then you're more than welcome via our live chat line, which you can get through our Facebook page. So you can either join the stream through Champion Bay Settlements or via Property Avenue WA. And, of course, we've also got a YouTube channel. So that's the options available to you. But I'm a bit upbeat. This is episode 52, which means it is actually 1 year that we've been broadcasting Property Avenue WA. And my first guest back then I did it on my own, in fact, the first episode. And then we got Jordan Ralph. And my second guest, Oscar D'Souza. Who do you reckon my second guest was?
I don't know. Did Jordan Ralph come back for a second time?
No, he didn't. This bloke can't not come back a second time. He's now my co-host, one Oscar D'Souza. And would you believe that was 13th of May 2020? And in that, we did have a few little audio issues at the start, but then we got that. But then one of your stats was, and you know how I like stats, there was a 35% decline in rentals back on the 13th of May, the week before, around about the 30th. I think it was the week before, 2 weeks before. Your stat was 35% decline in rentals back then.
Right. Okay.
I had a quick listen. So that was the go. Yeah. So it was really interesting. So that's what we're about tonight. We've got a range of topics to talk about, and I'll let you know what those are. More importantly, we're going to, one of the things that we're really intrigued about, and I've been reading a few articles, there's mention about investors are back. Are investors now entering the WA property market, and what pressure is that going to put on the housing market? So we'll discuss that with OD and myself. Interstate migration, I saw an article. I think a lot of that was focused around the amount of migration that was going to Queensland from New South Wales and Victoria. But certainly there is a positive migration to WA, so that's something we'll just touch on. First home buyers. The line in the, again, Eastern States papers suggesting that first home buyers are getting squeezed out of the property market. Is that the case with WA property? I'm not so sure. So we'll talk about that. We've got a couple of questions interesting questions that have been sent through during the week. So we'll discover the answers to your property questions. And, of course, we always like to have a look at the headlines and seeing if we've got time. And most importantly, I'm going to go back in time this time, OD. I'm going to go back and ask you the same question I asked you 12 months ago with regard to the if question, and just see what answer you give me this time compared to what you gave me 12 months ago. Mate, how is it, and how was your week?
TV, thanks for having me once again, and now 12 months on, as you mentioned, and mate, I've just had it's only Tuesday already, but I've had a very big day, and I deal mostly in the space of property management. Obviously, I still work with a couple of offices around the state, just in terms of helping them with property management. But then I'm in touch with a lot of real estate sales agents as well. So we've just got a very a bulletproof, a very sustained rental market and sales market, very high activity. But before we get stuck into the stats and just the powerhouse that is the WA property market, I do just want to go back to a couple of things that you've mentioned in your intro. First and foremost is the fact that today is episode 52, which practically represents 1 year, maybe just a bit over, but 1 year of your show, recording your show, and then I was a guest, and then now I'm just like a bit of a permanent guest as well. I love doing it. I love doing it with you, and I know that the podcast, I know that the the show that the live show that we're doing, you just hear people talking about it around the traps. It's not a WA name yet, or a national podcast, so to speak, but the traction that we've had, I guess, in the last 12 months has been very pleasing, for want of a better term. So congratulations, mate, on the 52nd episode, and I really do appreciate coming along for the ride. And that stat that you just mentioned to me, it almost caught me off guard, and that being the fact that there was a 35%. Did you say there was a 35% drop in rentals? That was the stat about 12 months ago?
Yeah, so we had a chat. You're only a guest then, and then you just infiltrated your way and now become co-host. I don't know where you think you're just a guest. You're the co-host, pal. And you're in that discussion. I quickly got some snippets, and one of the points you made was that had been a 35% decline in the rentals, and I think that was because COVID had come along. Your explanation was with COVID, there was a bit of the unknown at that point. And so therefore there was a little bit of hesitancy with what was going on at that point in time. You also made mention that there started to be some activity. The sales activity had started to increase around about that time. So that was part of our chat at that point when you came on and decided to give us some of the insights of what you could tell us all about.
So it's amazing to go back 12 months and to think about those stats as to where our sales and our rental market was back at that time. But in particular, going back 12 months from where we are today, we had just learned the first month or 5 weeks of COVID, and what COVID is, potentially how it is going to change the way we live life, how it's going to affect our economy. And I don't think anyone whatsoever would have thought or believed or predicted that it would have taken us on the journey that we have for the last 12 months. Most certainly back in May last year, we weren't experiencing a rental crisis. We weren't in the spot that we're at now. I do know, as we spoke in June, July, August, we started to talk about the declining numbers of available rentals, the troubles people were having in finding rental properties, and the fact that this crisis word did start to creep into our vocabulary, and well before, I guess, the state government would admit that there was a rental crisis, and maybe the industry even starting to talk about it as a topic, it was certainly a topic on our show beforehand as well. Now, as we move, we're another 10 to 12 months down the line, when we look back, we go, oh, yeah, well, of course we're in a rental crisis. We've been in a rental crisis all this year, and certainly in the tail end of last year as well. But at the time when you first started doing the show, TV, it wasn't a rental crisis. We just, bounced out of COVID, and we were trying to work out where's our market going. So good call by you back then. And then also, again, from the sales activity as well, the sales has just blown us out of the water, I think. And in particular, 3 weekends ago, I think it was, we here in WA had our long weekend lockdown. On the Friday afternoon, Martin McGowan called that lockdown because of the hotel quarantine worker that had COVID, tested positive. And so we went into a 3-day long weekend lockdown. That was about 3 weeks ago. And even in that time, we saw our sales activity numbers drop by about 35%. So just in the last 3 weeks, it was like, well, I wonder where this is going to go in terms of, is it going to stay there? Is it going to rebound? Is it going to drop further? And then this week, in the 7 days finishing up at the end of last week, we've got more than 1,000 sales, 1,042 sales just in Perth in 7 days. The weekend in the Friday just gone. So, and the week before that, I think it was 650 or 670 sales. So, mate, it's an absolute powerhouse, the WA market that we've got, both in sales, both in rentals. And I hope we get the opportunity to explore what I've been hearing amongst some real estate agents over the last 7 days, and that is they're starting to think or talk about the heat coming out of the market. Not so much in the rentals area, but certainly in the sales. They feel that sting and that FOMO in parts of the metro area seems to have started to wane a little bit and maybe started to settle down. Has it? The stats don't really show it, but hopefully we get the opportunity to talk about that a bit further over the next 40 minutes. You're on mute.
Just very quickly. Yes, I know. I just do it all the time. It's a terrible, terrible thing I do. Just with regard to the week as well, of course, I do hope that we sort of digress to the property market, but I will digress back to Mother's Day we had on the weekend, and of course footy results, and then Ash Barty sort of I think she was just sort of priming herself for the French Open. So it's been an interesting week. How did you go with Mother's Day, just quickly?
I had a great day. I spent the day with my wife and my two little girls, mostly around the house, just hanging out. Coffees, presents, that sort of stuff. But ultimately, just spending time with each other, which was good. And then over to Beck's parents' place for lunch and basically the afternoon. And just on the way through, we stopped at my mum's place just for a quick hug. But literally, we didn't even turn the car off. Just a very quick hug on the driveway. And then we carried on to Beck's folks' place. So, and then we got home in time to watch, I think, the tail end of the Dockers literally getting their tail end whacked.
Wasn't all bad, but there was a good footy result on Friday, I thought. But just an observation.
On Friday, who played then?
I can't remember now. It's a long time ago. Just one quick question. You made mention earlier on about we're not national and we're not big with regard to what we do when it comes to exposure. We get on average 500-600 people viewing or listening or whatever the case would be. So that's okay. We'll work on it. But interestingly, you say that. I've had a few people that have contacted me from the East Coast and making comment that they've picked up on our podcast and find it interesting. One young lady made point that she found it not only it wasn't just boring, but she found it very interesting, but also it was had a bit of lightheartedness about it. So she enjoyed that. So it was nice to get that sort of feedback sometimes. And I've also had a little message here from one JB, a well-known Bendigo Bank person, who's made, hey, legends, congratulations on the anniversary, 52 episodes. So there you go.
Yeah.
A few positives.
Look, JB, thanks very much for that. At TV, hopefully I know that you had a great Mother's Day. I know because you mentioned that to me before. When is our great friend JB, when's he going to make an appearance and come and join us and talk to us about what's going on in the lending sector and what are some of the challenges in his world? I'd love to share the screen with JB.
I've got a big asterisk alongside his name because that is one of my intentions. But I will tell you who our guests are in the coming weeks. But we'll get back to where we started and more particularly what our topic is. So have you got any more stats you want to address, or are you pretty happy with what we've done stat-wise tonight?
Mate, I think it's just the same story. Both the sales and rental market are very, very active. There's not enough stock across both markets. There's still lots and lots of people looking to rent properties. There's lots of people looking to buy properties as well. There has been a few murmurs from some real estate agents over the course of this week that are suggesting that, hey, has the sting gone out of the market? We're not getting 20 and 30 groups through home opens anymore. It's coming back to 5 or 5 to 10. So there's some suggestion that maybe the sting is out of the market a little bit, but then those same real estate agents on those forums that are making those comments, there are a few other agents coming back and saying not at all, it's strong as an ox. So maybe there is a bit of a shift happening, but we'll see over the next month. But we've still got two very, very strong markets.
Which gets back to the question that our headline are investors now entering the WA property market? Because it's certainly that is being the suggestion, and you talk about cooling off, but if the investors are coming back, is that sort of going to balance that up a little bit and perhaps not cool off quite as we suspect? What is your observations?
So my observations are certainly there's definitely more investor interest. But investor interest over the last 12 months really has been so low that all we need to, we may have even doubled investor interest just in the last 6 months. That's demonstrated by the loans, the amount of lending that's gone on, by the way. So that's not me plucking out a generalization. But in order for the amount of investment loans to double, if it's doubling from a very, very low base, it still doesn't mean that there's a lot of investors around. It just means that it was painfully low before. What I do know, though, from the investors' point of view, is that in WA, comparative to the eastern states, our prices are low. We've got a very, very good rental market through the Perth metropolitan area and also through just about every regional town. So your rental return is high, your vacancy rate is low, your rents are going up, and that's all complemented by very cheap money. Interest rates at very historic low rates. So if money's so cheap and the cost of borrowing is so cheap, your rental vacancy is minimal and your rents are going up. And we know that we're on a growth upward cycle here in WA. That makes for the best, literally the best. I don't know what could make it a better recipe for an investment. So we're certainly seeing some greater investor interest, and a lot of that I think is coming from outside of WA as well.
Yeah, I've had a few people that are inquiring with regard to investment wise, and I do have a question with regard to that, which we'll get into our Discover the Answers segment. But with that being the case, when we talk about investors coming in, is that going to create more pressure on the housing market? Because at the moment, as you've highlighted with some of your stats in the recent weeks, there's still a demand for property. There's still a demand. The agents are saying they're running out of listings. I mean, yes, sure, there's X amount on the market, but there's the choice is not necessarily there. So where's that put when it comes to pressure?
Yeah, look, there is on one hand, it's an increased level of pressure because we've got like a new buyer segment coming in. But on the other hand, the motivations of those buyers are different from our traditional buyers in our market over the last 12 months, which most of that has been coming from owner-occupiers. Now, owner-occupiers are looking for themselves to live in, for their families to live in, to upgrade their homes, and there is that level of emotion attached to their buying decision. Whereas the investors, they're not really looking to live into those properties in the main. So they're really looking at it from a much more a scientific and a numbers basis. And does this stack up for me as a good investment? So it is introducing more buyers to the market, but just buyers that are motivated by different means. On the rental side, though, it's a very good thing to have these investors coming into the market because obviously that will increase rental supply, and that's absolutely what WA needs. That's definitely what Perth needs. But to have more investors that are going to be increasing the supply of rental properties is a very, very good thing to ease the pressure on our rental market. And I would have hoped that, not that I've seen the budget speech today, but I would have hoped that there would have been some incentive provided for investors to invest more in real estate and ease the pressure on our rental prices. But that might be wishful thinking.
No, I haven't looked at the budget yet either. And what I will mention while we talk about that is that I suppose it's expected for the investors to come back into the market because up until now with the moratoriums and all the various rental issues and if you like, there were some people probably jumped down our throats about this, but, there's a lot of protection for the tenant, not necessarily for the landlord. And hence, I suppose if you are someone who's going to invest in property, you're probably going to step back for a little bit until you know where everything's all clear and the opportunities are there. And hence, it's not surprising in some ways that investors are going, right, now things are pretty steady here in WA. It's still affordable. And as you say, the rental market is a good market, good return, not necessarily getting a good return with your money in the bank. And so here's an opportunity to perhaps diversify your portfolio and get back into the market if you're not already there, or first time into the market, an opportunity. Yes?
Yeah, and also not forgetting that over the last 5 years in particular, the real estate market hasn't been as good as what it has just over the last 6 to 9 months in terms of growth. So there's been a lot of investors that have been holding properties and hurting whilst the rentals haven't been as great.
You've frozen, my friend.
Oh, okay. I'll move around a bit. I'll try and break free. Am I still frozen?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Yep.
So yeah, the rental market
No, you're good.
hasn't been that supportive of the investment market, and the investors haven't been getting that capital growth. So up to now, when the market starts to recover, there is a number of investors that have just had enough and have just been looking to either recover or to reduce their losses. Maybe they've made a little bit of money, but there's more investors that have been holding property over the last 5 years that have been divesting, that have been selling off, than there have been new investors coming into the market. So that also places a greater pressure on the rental market, because when investors are selling their rental properties, most of the time that's not actually being bought by other investors. In our market, it's been the case that it's been bought by owner occupiers, which means that the rental market suffers. So it's really, really good news, very, very welcome news to know that there are more investors coming back into the market, and I really, really hope that continues.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be really important because it is of some concern. And where did I hear someone on TV the other day, only in the last couple of days or so, making mention she was associated with homelessness, and there was some ridiculous amount of people. And as it was explained, there is a particular person that is. It's become a very broad situation, and as we discussed with our guest last week, Warren Taylor, who's from Warren Taylor Homes, and when it comes to building, as he explained, the building side of things have been extended out. They are waiting for weeks on end for materials, etc., to come through, so that's putting pressure on the builders. And of course, the chain reaction to that is, if you're renting a property with the expectation you're going to be moving into your new home, there's a likelihood that build and that house ready for you to move in is probably going to be longer than planned, and you're getting pressure on with regard to having to move out of your rental property possibly. There's that chain reaction in every facet when it comes to the property market, and that's just one of them. So, it's something that we will keep a tab of and try and get some different guests in to have a chat about that particular area. Hey, just very importantly, because we also for those that may be listening or watching or perhaps necessarily watching but listening, our podcast comes out every Wednesday. So because you can't necessarily see our disclaimer, we'll quickly let you know that this is a general advice disclaimer. The information on this podcast is to be regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. Oh, I get caught up with that every week. I got it 2 weeks in a row, and then I messed up. I know, 2 weeks in a row. We always advise and recommend you seek personal, professional, and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property, and investment decisions. So, as we say, get someone that you can rely on, who's expert in the field, and to run past things. Don't just take it for granted, and certainly don't take what we're saying is very, very generalized, and it's not specific, and you need to be important. It's important that you identify that, which comes to another point. I've had a few issues that have been raised over the last week or so, which are really, it highlights the importance of getting the right information and the right advice before you get to a contract. And we might just, if we've got time, raise a couple of those in our question time. The other point that I was going to mention when we go back to what we were talking about just then, interstate migration. Again, my point was, it appears to be, I picked up some stats with regard to that, and at this point in time, and this is up to the December quarter at this stage, and you know how I love stats, I always look for these sort of things, but the interstate migration, so New South Wales has a net minus of just under 5,500 people. So there's 5,500 people net left New South Wales. Victoria is minus 6,500.
Sorry, is that just for the December quarter?
For the December quarter. And they don't believe that's improved much in the March quarter. And then in Queensland, it's plus 9,700. That's in round figures. And WA is 1,200.
Plus
1,200. Now you may recall in one of our episodes, I gave you some statistics about the million people that we're planning to sell in 2021. Yeah, and it was estimated some 7,000 or 8,000 people were planning to move to WA from the East Coast.
Yeah.
So if that's the December quarter, we're probably on track for that 7,000 or 8,000 plus people moving to. So that's a net figure. Okay, that's not a. So we had some, to give you some idea, we had some departures were 20,000 from WA. From WA 7,700, and our arrivals were some just under 9,000.
Right.
Get me?
Okay. Yeah, right? Yeah.
So that's where we get our net figures from. So that's
cool.
And so yeah, interstate migration, you know, the question is it real? Yes, it is. And of course that creates further pressure when you've got a net figure, a positive net figure, that puts further pressure on the housing market, which to me, I mean, obviously not all those people are going to buy. Some of those already have property here. And I know, and you know, we have clients that have bought from the East Coast that we've been looking after. Yeah. So interstate migration absolutely is real. Yeah.
It's an interesting stat that because I mean I know that the Sydney real estate market, even with people leaving and 5,000 people isn't a massive number for Sydney, but the Sydney real estate market is absolutely going gangbusters, more so in terms of growth than what WA is. And I don't know exactly, but I think Victoria isn't following too far behind. But that's certainly good news for Queensland, having a net migration of what you said, 8,000 for a quarter.
Yep.
I wonder what the besides the obvious, but I wonder why go to Queensland and why not come to WA? If those, where are those 8,000 leaving?
I think they're going for lifestyle. They might change their mind when they get some of these floods and some of these cyclones and things occurring. But perhaps just staying on that side of the country, who knows? But certainly when you consider what we've got to offer here, and what we have climate-wise and variety, and it seems to be there's still an interest in regional areas. That certainly hasn't. I've been up in Geraldton for a week or two, attending to a few things there, and a few addressing a few complex matters that obviously some of those were created due to the cyclone. But it certainly is interesting as to people inquiring just with our office and my consulting side of things, looking to move to regional WA. So that is still a positive. And I think when we spoke to Henry Van Til a few episodes ago, Henry certainly conveyed that same message. So I don't think that's going away in a hurry.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's good, and I just, on the face of it, TV, I'm just glad that WA is in the positive in terms of its net migration. And I really would think that's going to get over the next 6 months, from now through to the end of the year, the jobs boom that we've got going on here, the economic boom, the resources boom. I heard last night, I think, and I haven't checked on the commodity prices, but has iron ore gone north of $200 a ton?
I haven't checked that yet,
I'm
but
sure I heard on
I've
the
got a
news
feeling
last night, or on the panel or something like that. They made a comment of it had hit $212 a ton for iron ore.
well, our Bendigo bank manager,
Yeah,
I think if he's listening, he'll be able to answer that for us. But he has
yeah,
come
cool.
back with a question, or not so much a question, but a statement. Caution has to come into play soon in this market. Surely demand from owner occupiers will decrease and investors must have some concern on future capital growth. That's probably true, but also something that I read is just buyer exhaustion. That situation whereby, trying to buy that property. I know I've got a client who I've been assisting with my consulting work, and I know she is becoming a little bit frustrated and in some ways disappointed with some reactions from the real estate side of things. She's become a little bit frustrated with going into home opens and there's other people, you're sort of competing with others. So that to a point where some people turn around and say, you know what, I'm just going to back off for a while.
Yeah,
And I spoke to a young guy today, and that was his point. He sort of said, TV, I'm just going to wait and see what happens in the next 12 months. And if
yeah,
it's still going along, I'll just have to take that on the chin.
yeah, yep. I've
So,
come across a handful of people in exactly the same predicament, just over the course of this year as well. So when things go as crazy, I guess is what we've seen them go, for the best part of 12 months, there are some people, and pretty intelligent people as well, I think, that do sit there and go, you know what, I'm just going to sit on my hands and not do anything. If it keeps going up, well, so be it. But I don't want to be sitting around when the rain turns into a pouring rain, and it's, yeah, but they're happy to err on the side of caution. Mute? Are you on mute?
my button's not working. First home buyers, they've obviously still got some enthusiasm with the property market. I've had first home buyers inquire with me when it comes to buying vacant land still. I've had first home buyers who are still wishing to buy established homes and asking the questions and wanting assistance and direction, which comes to another point while I think about first home buyers. Our home buyer journey with Kieran, we're going to, because of his commitments during the week, it's hard to get him live, but we're going to do a pre-recording, which in that pre-recording, which we'll do over the weekend and we'll then put it out there, we will also make inquire, because I haven't had a chance to do some homework on some of the incentives that have been announced for first home buyers but at government level.
Yeah,
I really haven't had, it's been a busy time as you and I both know. So we'll follow that up and we'll include that in our first home buyer journey segment when we do that recording on the weekend, and then we will let you know when that's out and about and have a chat for particularly focusing on the first home buyers, because there are some articles with regard to that. But getting back to this headline, so first home buyers squeeze out of property market, is that the case with WA property? I'm not quite sure that is the case, although when we talked to Kieran, I spoke to him the other day to see how he's progressing, and he's not. I think, some of the things he's been exposed to were a little challenging. He's also been busy. But then I look at the other part being is that the number of first home buyers that I've spoken to and I'm providing support and assistance with, they're still enthusiastic because they still see it as an opportunity, and perhaps in some cases seeing it as an opportunity because they can pay off for their home, their first home, with just as much money as they can by renting a place at the moment.
yeah, Yeah, mate. Look, that's exactly right, and that goes back to the point of the extremely low interest rates that we've got. The other thing being as well, when I think back to me being a first home buyer, and I can hear the voice of my old man, and the incentives around first home buyers, particularly grants, were a little bit different back then. They weren't as restrictive, um, and they almost should be. I reckon they should be as unrestrictive now as what they were back then. And by that I mean you could buy. The idea of having a first home buyer was not that the first home buyer is going to move into their dream home. It's not going to be a forever home. It's not going to be a home just for 6 months or 12 months or whatever. What the incentives were surrounding first home buyers was really to get our first home buyers, to get them a leg up into a very expensive and challenging property market, because largely because of the price point, entry price point, but then also the acquisition costs. And by that, I'm referring to deposit, stamp duty, and any other fees as well. So, um, and so back in my day, my dad would say, "Look, it's don't worry too much about what it is that you're buying. You don't have to get a 600 square meter block, or you don't have to get a 4 bedroom home. Just find something in what you consider is a good area, something that you think will have good future growth potential, and also if it's going to become an investment property where you think that there's going to be good demand from tenants. So that might be a 1 bedroom unit in East Victoria Park, or it might be a 2 bedroom villa in Lockridge, or it might be a 3 bedroom place in Nollamara, or like there's lots of things that you can be looking at as a first home buyer. That does not mean the home that you're going to live in for the next 5, maybe even 10 years. So I think that's probably a societal change whereby the younger people that have come in, that have been coming through, have just got a different set of motivations and or expectations around what that first home should be. That said, though, there are restrictions in order to qualify for the grants, that you must live in the property for 12 months or 24 months. So I do understand the grants have become a bit more restrictive. But yeah, I think there's just a different motivation for the first home buyer than what it was 20 years ago.
Yep. And guess what? Our Mr. Reliable. Yeah, I'll go back to what you were saying first. Yes, you did right. And I know certainly when I bought a home way back in, I don't know, late
1920,
70s, I suppose.
1927, 1927.
I don't think so. There's no need to be rude, okay? No need to be rude at all. In fact, I'll tell you a little giggle. I went in to have my hair cut today, and you know how they get the mirror and they show the back of your head, etc. I went, whoa, 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 go back a step. He said, "What's the matter, TV?" And I've been going to this hairdresser since I was at uni days, and I say uni very lightly, because me attending uni was non-existent. But anyway, he went back with a mirror, and I went, "Is that what I think it is? Is that actually a patch there? Yeah, it's not pretty." But getting back to getting back to the situation with regard to buying a home. Yeah, I know when I bought my first home, it was something like 78,000 or 80,000, I think it was. And I looked at South Perth, where we lived at the time and renting, and thought, no. And I could buy a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom with a pool, and it was a big deal over at Riverton, Parkwood sort of area. And so I chose, but the agent back then, that's when people were starting to say, well, maybe you should look at a 4 bedroom, 1 bedroom, or a 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom, which wasn't that common then. But they were sort of trying to encourage back then to do that, because for resale value, well, I wasn't looking at resale. I was looking just getting into my first home. So, it's a good point. I think sometimes we've got to entertain what suits you and your circumstances now, and just to get the foot in the door, as we say, is pretty important for first home buyers.
Yeah. Because, I mean, a first home buyer, you can go, Kieran, as an example, could go along, and we know that he's got a very, very healthy deposit because he's a very motivated boy. So he could go along and buy something that maybe it's not even for him to live in, so long as he satisfies the criteria of whatever grants and concessions that he's going to get as a first home buyer. Maybe it's something that he would go and buy, and he might only spend 250 or 350,000, and then he can, you know what, he can continue to live with his parents. Or if that doesn't suit him, there's no harm. Renting's not a bad word. You can go and rent somewhere else, and go and rent with a friend or a girlfriend or with a couple of mates or something like that. And that rent isn't necessarily dead money, because you're alive, you're living, and rent is just one of those expenses. But meanwhile, you've got a foot in the property market, and you'll get the benefit of having an investment property, and obviously the capital growth. So I'm not saying that's the way to go. What I am saying is be broad in your thinking for first home buyers, and yeah, get into the market when the time's right for you.
And as we say in our disclaimer, look, everyone's circumstances are different. And as we always say, get advice to assist you, and perhaps get that advice before you jump in, because I've had a couple of scenarios in the last week or two that really have been probably in some ways, maybe it's FOMO, maybe it's the pressure's on, we've got to get in. Otherwise, if you don't buy this now, you'll miss out. You won't get another opportunity. And sometimes that's what's been suggested. But perhaps also it might help that some of the cases we've got, and one of the questions that's been raised is a question that's been asked of us this week, or asked of me this week. But it is really, really important that whatever you do, please ensure, if we can't do anything else but give you a little tip, please ensure that you get the right advice, because once you sign that contract, I've had some scenarios that really are in some ways disturbing, and in some ways it's a little bit of pressure. Sometimes it's just ignorance, and it's really important that there's enough pressure on buying a property or selling a property, no matter how many times you've bought and sold. But if it's your first home buying experience, you want it to be a good one, and not one that you're going to regret and perhaps make you very nervous from then on when it comes to buying and investing in property. So it is really, really important. If we can give you one little tip, just be very conscious. Perhaps what we might do, OD, is we might have a little segment with regard to that in the coming episodes, and we'll go along those lines and address a few things that perhaps you need to be conscious of.
Great idea, TV.
Hey, yeah. I'll just go to discover the answers to your property questions. One of the questions I've had this week, I'll just get rid of that little there. One of the questions I had this week was that this person has advised, I've bought a property, but now I've found is not connected to sewer. I've been told that I'm now responsible to connect to the sewer. Is this correct? Would you like me to answer that question?
Yeah, TV.
I'm going to anyway.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to. So it's one of these bone of content. It is one of these issues that a lot of people are not aware of, and a lot of people don't even ask the question, and it's not even raised by in a lot of cases, not even raised by the real estate agent when it comes to that point of sale, and perhaps in some cases not even raised by the real estate agent when they are listing the property. Now, and people in the metro area might turn around and say, well, that's a ridiculous question because everyone's connected to sewer. But remembering we're talking about property in WA, not property just in Perth, and not property just in other localities where sewer is connected. There are still pockets, and particularly in regional areas, where a sewer is not connected. And there may be, for example, there may be a block of land that you're buying that hasn't got connected to sewer, or there may be a small property on that and it hasn't got connected to sewer. So it is still a question that needs to be asked. But the question that's been asked of me is that this person has now found that her property that she's bought, she hasn't settled this, but she's asked the question and said, I've just found out that my property is not connected to sewer. We then she made some inquiries and then came back to me, and we made some further inquiries with regard to that and found that the property is definitely not connected to sewer. We made some inquiries with the Water Corp. However, the current owner of that property had been notified they were required to connect to sewer, but there is no follow-up process, and the seller hasn't bothered doing it, right? So they're on septics. Under the terms of a contract, and a lot of people would not be aware of this, but under the terms of an offer and accept, when you buy a property, and if it is not connected, under section 12, which is sewer septic tanks in the general conditions, 218, section 12.2, land not connected. If on the contract date, the land is not connected to a water corporation sewer, and whether or not the water corporation has issued a notice requiring the land to be connected to a water corporation sewer, the buyer is solely responsible for the connection of the land to a water corporation sewer. So if you buy a property and you haven't checked that before or asked that question of the real estate agent, or the real estate agent, quite honestly, should be, I get back to the fact of being some sort of due diligence, should be part of their listing advice, whether it's connected to sewer or not. In this particular case that this lady, I asked the lady with regard to the question raised, I said, are you buying now? Have you settled now? She said, no, I am in the process. I've signed a contract, but I haven't settled. She hasn't been erased, and she since found out that the agent had been told by the seller that it had been not connected, but they hadn't raised that with the buyer. So there's a bit of a grey area now, because under the general conditions, technically she is liable. But the question being raised is that it wasn't brought to the buyer's attention at the point of sale. And there's a bone of contention now, which obviously becomes legal advice, not Tony Viner advice. But it becomes a bone of contention as to who's right or who's wrong in this case, and should the real estate agent have raised that. But it's really, really important if you're buying a property, particularly in regional WA and some of the smaller communities, and yes, even in metropolitan area, you still should check that to ensure that once you sign that contract at that point of sale, no matter whether the seller's been notified or not, you become responsible. So it's really important to clarify that. And if it is not connected and you've been advised that the seller's received a notification to connect, then the option is to write a special condition in there that can address that in some way, because it can be an expensive exercise.
Yeah. It's a really good topic, TV, a really good question that's been asked of you, and a really good point that's been raised. And it goes further than just sewer. I'm dealing on a property at the moment that is not in the Perth metropolitan area. In fact, it's not quite the fringe of the Perth metropolitan area. It's a little bit further, I guess, than the fringe. But not only is the area, it's a vacant block of land. So not only is it not sewered, but there's no water connected to this block of land. So there's no water services. So, and the person that's looking at the property, I think their intention is to develop it, and probably develop it with a homestead, a house. But if you can't have water to that block of land, it will cause you, you're going to have to go to water storage tanks, basically. So, but that really isn't the intention. So therefore, you have to look at, well, how much am I going to pay for the land? And am I going to wait for one day, 10, 20 years down the track, when the water services will naturally be extended through to my property? Or am I going to pay for a special extension of the existing water services and run the water services up? And I don't know, I think in this instance, it might have been somewhere around about 1 kilometre that they'd have to run these water services, and the cost was absolutely astronomical. Basically got to the point where it doesn't make any commercial sense at all to develop the block, solely because the cost of extending that water services to the block is so prohibitive. So you just wouldn't. So therefore, that land almost becomes, I wouldn't say valueless, but you can't really do a whole lot with it until you can provide water. So that's an extreme example of the same point that you just made. Really, really important to dot the I's and cross the T's. And it'll be interesting to find out where that one that you just said, where that finishes up, as in who will ultimately be responsible for the cost associated with connecting to sewer.
That particular person has now asked me to list them, and so I will be able to follow that through. And there's no doubt there's obviously going to be legal advice required, but it is a bit of a shame the way I see it. In a common sense approach, if the Water Corporation have issued you a notice as the current owner to have that property connected within the next 24 months, let's say that was 4 years ago, and you haven't done it, I find it sort of somewhat morally wrong, if you know what I'm saying, that there's no follow-up system by the Water Corporation where they've issued an instruction that property is going to be connected to sewer. There's no follow-up required, or they don't do any follow-up, and I've checked this as well on more than one occasion. And then they sell that property knowing full well they haven't honoured that instruction, and then suddenly you, the buyer, the minute you sign that contract, the onus is on you, and they chase you up to do it, I might add. Water Corporation, the minute that changes ownership, they're all over you like a rash. I think personally it would avoid a lot of issues if the Water Corporation did their job and followed the matter up. If they issued an instruction to connect to sewer, then follow it up, for heaven's sake, instead of this drama that's left with the buyer, the settlement agent, a lawyer, and the real estate people. That's my little. Shall we say that's a little rant? That's a little rant. We'll say that's a little rant.
No, it certainly
is. Another question.
Sorry, you go. Next question.
No, go on. Keep going. Quick.
I was just going to make a quick comment about real estate agents, and I know for a fact that good operating real estate agents, part of their process would be to check whether the property is connected to deep sewage or not. And as I said, good real estate agents would do that as part of their due diligence. It's not the law that they need to do that. They're technically not doing anything wrong, but good practicing real estate agents would actually do that as part of their own due diligence.
Yep, totally agree. Another quick question. Is possession prior an option? Now, this is a goodie. I like this because we get this question asked a lot, actually. Well, when I say we, the girls get this question asked a lot in the settlement agency. Is possession prior if settlement is delayed, but I need to move from my rental property? I'm going to get you to answer that question.
Can you ask the question again, please?
Righto. Is possession prior, it's on your screen now, is possession prior an option if settlement is delayed, but I need to move from my rental property?
Oh, right. Okay, so I need to move.
So I'm buying a property.
Yeah. Okay, so is possession prior to? So is it an option? It is an option if the seller is willing to offer you possession prior to settlement. So, but if the seller is not willing to entertain it, no, it's not an option. But it, in practical purposes, yes, it could be a consideration. It's an entirely separate discussion as to whether or not it's an option, whether you should actually do that.
Yep, and I would also strongly suggest that you get advice with regard to that before you did it, both as a seller and as a buyer. And I talk with experience, and I know we've had like classic example a few years ago. We had Christmas time. We had a removalist full of furniture moving down to wherever they were moving from to the city, the metropolitan area, and suddenly, this is before electronic conveyancing, and suddenly settlement was called off for whatever reason, and here's the buyer with the furniture truck all lined up outside the house waiting to move, and no go. And real estate at the time was recommending to the seller not to proceed with possession prior. It caused a lot of grief, and of course, worse still, there was something like, I think it was a day, might have been, I don't think it was Christmas Eve, but it might have been the day before Christmas Eve. And of course, in those days, because it was manual settlements, Christmas Eve was fully booked out because settlements stopped come lunchtime. No settlements proceeding. So the morning was fully booked out. And basically, there was a lot talking going on and trying to manipulate something, because otherwise these buyers were going to be homeless for some 5 or 6 days after the Christmas break before they could get settlement happening and move in. So, possession prior can have some positive results, but it's also something very, very important from my point of view and from my experience to get the right advice, both as a seller and as a buyer, because there are a lot of things to consider, and there's no shortage of good stories, but there's no shortage of not so good stories. So you need to be very, very careful with regard to that process. We're once again running out of time, so we'll avoid. I do have another very good question, but it's a good one which we'll hand over next week. A couple of things that I want to mention before we get to a couple of headlines. Have you seen our new merchandise? I've got one of these for you. Look,
that looks
our
brilliant.
new stubby holders. Hey, look at that! I picked them up from Mario today, and I'm sure that our correspondent who. Oh, by the way, JB, he did respond as he always does.
Yeah.
With regard to, where are we, JB? Iron ore,
yes.
$200 per ton or ton, and copper is at a record high of $10,420 per ton.
Wow.
How's that,
out, mate?
How's that for a stat?
I'd love to know if he's still around, if he's still awake. I'd love to know what the iron ore price was 12 months ago. I'd love to know that, JB. Get typing, mate.
He also made mention he's interested in our thoughts on the federal budget initiative for single parents. But I think we might keep that for next week, which comes to another point before I get to the if question. Now, remember, the if question is a question I asked you 12 months ago, and I'm going to see how you go with your answer. But more importantly, have I got some excitement for you? Our guest next week, we're going to discuss insurance, and who better to ask than one Justin Collins. He's a busy man. He's been under the pump. So Justin is an insurance broker. He's with Advisor, and JC was on as our guest back in, where was it? 29th of July last year was the last time we had him on. Excellent. So we're going to, he's been a hard man to collar, but there's lots of good things to talk to him about coming up to winter. So Justin, if you want to know some things about insurance, he's going to be our guest next week. I've got someone coming up in the next week or two or couple of weeks or so to do with private sales, buying and selling your house privately. Yep. I thought that'd be a good topic. I've got someone coming up that I've got to contact, but they're really keen to come on board from the Southwest and do that. And I'm really keen, if anybody's got someone, or if you're a listener or you're someone, we would love to talk to someone about internal decoration, internal design, interior design. Love to get someone to have a chat as our guest, and we want to talk and see what's going on with interior design, thoughts, good ideas, bad ideas, and what people are looking for in their homes when it comes to interior design. So there are a couple of things that we're heading towards. A couple of headlines very, very, very quickly, because you've got to put your kids to bed. First-time home buyers are asking their parents for help as at an all-time high. It's 61%, and this time last year was only 8%. And in 2011, it was only 9%, and the average parent loan is approximately $89,500.
Did you say 61%?
There you go. 61% of first home property buyers are parents are providing assistance, which was only 8% this time last year, which is probably understandable. It was fairly low this time last year. But however, that is a staggering figure. I'll tell you about that more. I've got that as a topic when it comes to first home buyers, and I think I'd love to talk the mum and dad bank as a topic separate altogether, if we can get a guest on board with regard to that. Okay, I've got that. The other thing I want to make mention about these little merchandise, just quickly, the Geraldton Golf Club has got their Geraldton Amateur Open, which my business, Champion Bay Settlement, sponsors. and that is coming up in the long weekend in June. So if you're a golfer and you win a prize, you might get one of our stubby holders as part of your prize. But that is coming up. If you're a golfer and you love your golf, the Jordan Golf Club runs a fabulous event. It's been going for some 90 years, give or take World War breaks, of course. And, of course, last year there was the COVID, which interrupted the event. But it's 90 years, basically, that the event has been going, which is quite enormous when you consider it, a country club. Fabulous golf course, and me being a golfer, you don't mind me. And the reason why you're saying, well, how comes he talking about that on his podcast? Mainly because I'm the sponsor and have been. My dear dad and I have been sponsoring it for some 40 years or something silly. So look forward to seeing golfers come up there, come up to Geraldton and enjoy the hospitality, but enjoy a fabulous golf course, grass greens, and you will be pleasantly surprised, I can tell you. Now that I've advertised that, the if question. The if question.
Baby.
If you had only one food, where is it? If you had only one food to eat for the rest of your time, right? You didn't have a choice. What would that food be and why?
Are you serious? You've asked me this before.
I asked you this question on the 13th of May, 2020.
Yeah, I don't recall the question. And
you don't have to remember. You don't have to remember the answer. You're just going to give me an answer now, and I'll tell you what your answer was. But I'm just asking that question now. What was your answer?
If I had to eat the one food for the rest of my life.
Yep.
I'll just go with KFC.
Oh, please. How things have changed in 12 months. Do you know what your answer was back in 13th of May, 2020?
Subway?
Gnocchi at Inchow Applecross.
Oh, no way. You didn't. No, you asked me about a favourite dish or something, not what the food that I eat for the rest of my life.
No, I didn't. I didn't. And you know what my answer was? Lamb shanks cooked with a lot of veggies and a lovely red wine sauce because I'd only had it a couple of days prior.
What? So
I cooked it, in fact, myself.
Every meal for every day for the rest of your life, you'd have that.
That's your meal. That was your go-to meal. That's just one of those silly questions. You know how I have those silly if questions?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure once again. Thank you for celebrating our 52nd episode. And I look forward to doing another 52 with you. It's been a pleasure. Some great topics, some good discussion. I will just finish on a note that one suggestion being made by you-know-who, suggestion, merchandise should be a prize for the most active listener.
Well, I think we should just make a call right now and say, no worries, that sounds good, and maybe you can, maybe he can pop down and pick one up.
I'll personally deliver it to him. Mate, been a pleasure. For all those that are listening and all those that are following, don't forget tomorrow the podcast is made available wherever you listen or get your podcast from, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and there's many more. We will post it so you can get it on our Facebook pages. If you want to get the link, if you've not been done it before, you're welcome to. If you've got questions and anything you want to do with regard to property, you always can send an email through, or you can send a message via our Facebook page, Property Avenue WA, or by all means, give us a shout. You know where we work, you know where we are, or you can ask us a question via our live chat line. Please take care. Enjoy your football or whatever the case may be this weekend. If you're playing sport, enjoy that too. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week for episode 53 with Justin Collins, and we're going to talk insurance. And before I go, just quickly, there's been a quick comment. A great show, gents. Great show. Thank you very much. I love it when we get those positive responses. Take care. Speak to you soon.
You're giving him a stubby holder.
Oh, we've had a little glitch. Hang on, I'm going to go.